Like you mentioned, she is convincing and she's an accomplished liar. And maybe people like the fame that was associated with her, but something about her, she's effective of infecting people. And so she gets in there and she influences them. She's very good at that. So she fooled the ACLU and then backed it up with this promise or expectation of getting millions of dollars.
An accomplished liar. That is such an interesting phrase, and I think that it rings true with her.
The Love and Order Podcast with your host, LawyerLimor.
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed on this podcast are not legal advice that can be relied on. They are based solely on the limited information provided. These opinions do not create any attorney-client relationship. Those seeking legal advice should contact an attorney in the appropriate jurisdiction and practice area.
I am so excited for our guest today on the pod. No stranger to the courtroom, Christopher Melcher has been a practicing attorney for almost 30 years. And before his stardom in the family law space, he has practiced criminal defense and civil personal injury litigation. Now, I won't name names, but if you've been following me for a while, we've talked about Chris before, as he represents some of the most well-known people in Hollywood and the music industry. And his coverage of celebrity cases is quickly shifting him into the spotlight as well. My video about this pod episode is at almost 500,000 views, and I just posted it yesterday. And Chris, one follower, Mishy G29, said, "I'm creating a Twitter just to follow him." And I don't blame this follower. You are great on Twitter. You're having a lot of fun on social media with this case, aren't you?
Well, thanks, Limor, for having me on. And yeah, Twitter's been my thing. It's kind of, I've tried various platforms, and I got onto Twitter because there's a lot of reporters on there, and I it's just a way of kind of basically communicating story ideas to them. And with this Depp Heard trial, the engagement is phenomenal. I mean, it's just so cool to see everyone get involved and want to know about the legal process and the laws that are involved. Because I love the law, and to have other people be interested in it and have an opportunity to explain things in just basic terms, because the law is honestly not that complicated, and take that mystery out of it. I'm having a ton of fun. Honestly, not getting a whole lot of work done this month, but having a lot of fun with it.
Same here. Getting work done is just, thank God we both have our own firm. So it's a little bit easier for us. Everyone else catching up at night, they're catching up with us. And, social media has had such a big impact on this case. We have little private investigators, better than the ones we hire, all over this case, figuring stuff out, going to the courtroom to show them a makeup palette. What do you think the social media impact of this case has been?
Well, it's gigantic. I mean, I think anytime we support someone else, there's power to that. But then when you go one step further and spend your free time looking into the documents and the photographs and doing your own research and finding inconsistencies and seeing that Amber's got a bruise on one day in an exhibit, but then on the next day you're finding on the internet a picture of her with no bruise and sharing that. It is absolutely powerful. And I think it's making a difference in this case. I got to imagine the lawyers for both sides are monitoring all this stuff. And we saw the same thing in Free Britney, which was also a lot of fun to be involved in that. And that case, unfortunately, an abusive conservatorship, lasted for 13 years. They were taking her money and using it to plant media stories about how beneficial this conservatorship was. And it was only through the power of her movement and social media, just like we're seeing now, going and spending their own money to find court documents and analyze them, post them, that broke the case open. So we can see this for celebs, of course, but we can also see it for high profile issues. So that don't involve, known people. So it's extremely powerful. It's here to stay. And what's also interesting is that it's supplanting or taking over traditional media, because it wasn't that long ago that it was all about the traditional media. And now traditional media reporters and stuff like that, like I say, they're going to my Twitter threads and building stories based on that. It just totally blows my mind how that's changed.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. What would you say? So, a lot of people are confused about these expert witnesses in this case. There are multiple expert witnesses on both sides. We know that we have dueling witnesses all the time, right? But for a jury and for the audience at home, it seems to be a little bit confusing, I would say, right? And let me ask you this, because I've spoken to a lot of other colleagues and we seem to be on the same page about this. Dr. Curry, a fan favorite, very credible, a lot of intel she provided to the jury and people at home about mental illness and mental disorders. She had a 5-hour dinner at Johnny Depp's house with his attorneys, with him. She called it an interview. Do we vet experts in this way, knowing that they're going to be before a jury? She knew, they were going to take her deposition. She was going to be honest. She wasn't going to say, I didn't go to dinner with them or I didn't have this interview, right? But does that take away any of her credibility in your eyes? It doesn't for the audience at home, but based on the comments I've received. I don't know about the jury, but she is a fan favorite. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, she's incredible, and I think just taking a step back on expert witnesses in general, it's been very frustrating for me as a lawyer dealing with experts in court because a lot of them are not experts, and they take money to come in and express an opinion that they're not qualified to do. They're completely biased and unethical, and unfortunately, some judges buy it. And we're seeing in our custody cases, people losing their kids because somebody who claims to be an expert expressed an opinion against our client. So I have viciously gone after experts because of that. And then every once in a while, you see somebody like Dr. Curry who knows exactly what they're doing. So the experts that I retain, I'm very careful to protect them, to make sure that they're not going to be open to any criticism. And also I'm looking for people who are honest. It's just like I want their honest opinion, not the opinion that supports my client. So the issue with Dr. Curry that got raised, and it's the only ding that they found, was that, yeah, she went to interview with Depp's attorneys. Depp was there to see whether they're going to hire her or not. Now, ordinarily that would happen in the expert's office, but as she explained again today, that her client she called him homebound. Because you got to imagine if you're that famous, and Johnny said this, he can't even go out and get a cup of coffee without being a huge scene. And the stuff that we take for granted, like we just go out and get our mail from the mailbox. This guy, if he did that, TMZ paparazzi are going to be all over him. So it's a very sheltered life. And because of that, she had to go to his place to do the interview, which makes perfect sense. And then she says, well, I got hungry because it was so long and so they ordered some food and they ate dinner together. That is totally fine. I think the Moscow Mule, again, no big deal, but for her to, she really should have just not done that, just to be careful. When I'm having an expert like that, a forensic psychologist that's going to be testifying as a particular issue, I generally will shelter them from my client. I don't want them to talk to my client at all because I want the information known to the jury and to the other expert and the other attorneys, what my expert relied upon, so that it can be tested and saying like, hey, we looked at this data. People can come to different conclusions or not, but at least we know the data was relied upon. If you're having a meeting with one of the parties, that's not really data that we can expose to the other side. So again, no big deal. They made a much bigger deal out of it because she is such a powerful witness. But again, a very slight lapse of judgment, I think, in having the Moscow Mule. But I'm telling you, I'm going to have one going home tonight because I'm getting that's now I'm just like, I can't get that out of my head. It sounds
we had follower ATCRS say, can an expert witness be biased? It would trip me up if I were on the jury. They are both calling their own witnesses. They are paid by each side. So of course they're going to speak in favor of whoever hired them. And you touched on that, the money, right? We know in family law, we know their names. We know who can be bought, right? We already know. But I was very impressed. Like you said, Dr. Curry, listen, she was genuine about it. Yes, it was a 5-hour dinner. Yes, it was at his house, but it was an interview. The same 5-hour interview I would have had at the office. I didn't even have enough room in my office to have them in there. So I was really, really impressed by that. I have heard you say, Chris, we've both been on court TV. Like you said, social media is where it starts. Traditional media picks us up. I've seen you on court TV, ABC News. And I think you're one of the few attorneys who has said Johnny Depp has a very compelling case. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that you've said that before. And user Kitty Ara Lil said, top 3 things done well and missteps by both teams in Chris's opinion.
Sure. So I think, and I struggle with this at the beginning of the trial because it's Johnny's case and they eventually put Johnny on the stand and it was a very rough start for his testimony. And, I know Johnny's work through the movies, but I don't know anything about him personally. So I'm like, wow, his speech pattern is very slow and he's searching for words. And there's this softball question from his attorney right at the beginning of the examination. Mr. Depp, can you tell us why you're here? And you would think like you'd have that one ready to go. I am here because my former wife has lied about me and said vicious rumors about me, and I'm here to clear my name.
Right.
But it was this long, rambling answer that I was like, wow, this is not going well. And I was, okay, so should they have coached him? Can you coach? Maybe he didn't want to be coached is my guess. He wanted to come in as he is. We also see, my guess is that's part of it. My guess also is that when you have a celebrity client, you tend to treat them, unfortunately, sometimes different than the regular client. Now that's been, for me, I struggle against that. And a regular client, you'd be like, wow, hey man, get a haircut and you better get some good night's sleep. And we're going to work on these answers and you're going to have to speed this up. And I would just be brutally honest with the client. Now, if the client's Johnny Depp, is his attorney really going to say that?
Right.
So there's a lot of variables going on, but ultimately, he explained, and this is what's so endearing about Johnny is like he understands himself, and he just said, "Look, I'm not the guy in the movies. Those are lines that are written for me, and I practice them, and I speak as fast as they tell me to. But this is me." And it was like, wow, he's not acting. This is who he is, because you wouldn't act like he's acting because it makes it sound like why is he struggling for these words? So it became much more natural to me, much more endearing when I heard him explain all those struggles. But again, rough start, took him a long time. And now, he's much more comfortable as we saw him today. So I think there's, again, that was one issue there. I think on Amber's side, I have a lot of criticisms there. And again, they're probably suffering from the same problem. They have a difficult client who thinks a lot, isn't going to be susceptible to any kind of criticism. Okay, so once you say that, now like at least my mind would have opened up and listened to her and saying like, wow, okay, she's admitting things that are against her interest. She must be about to tell me the truth about point 2, because point 1, nobody gets to this. So I would have had her admit to that. That would have then taken a lot of the steam away from Dr. Curry, because Dr. Curry said, this is somebody who never takes responsibility. Well, boom, first question, take responsibility. Oh, well, maybe Curry's not right. I kind of like Amber now. I'm warming up to her because she's admitted to fault. And then for her to say, but Johnny did this to me. Man, it would have made such a big difference. But they either didn't think about it or they couldn't get her to do it. And so, those are the big overarching kind of things that I was thinking about. Like if I were managing this trial, I would have interjected a little bit earlier, I think, than these attorneys may have been doing to, and we even saw that with Johnny when he showed up. He had the hair out and he kind of looked pretty wild. And here's a guy that's, they're talking about his drug history and he looks, he's pretty wild with that hair out. And that lasted maybe the first week or something like that. And then it's been in a ponytail ever since then. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've said the same thing. The way the way Johnny was in the courtroom at first, the appearance, we would never, the first thing clients ask us is, how do I dress for court? What do I look like for court? What should I do? Right? But I think enough people online and on television were talking about his appearance that first week, and it changed up. And I absolutely agree with you about Amber coming in and just admitting to those things. Admit to them. It is, to me, very, very clear that there was DV perpetrated by Amber Heard on Johnny Depp based on the evidence that I have seen and heard. And, people like to say, are you pro Johnny or pro Amber? I am anti-DV. However way you look at it, I am anti-DV. That's where I stand. And I don't think Amber's done herself any favors. And on the other hand, we see Johnny Depp very open about his drug use that I think the other side was going to try to use against him. But he knew he's going to admit to it. His friends admitted to it. And they kind of, took the sting out of it from the other side. Nothing really happened with it anymore, right? Once you admit it, they can't really do anything with it. There's no movement. Now, you were talking about the inconsistencies with Amber. You mentioned sometimes once you see a photo with a bruise on her face, then a photo without a bruise on her face. What did you think about her on the stand when she gave her initial direct testimony? She said, bruise kit. She said, bruise kit. And then she tried to backtrack. I call it my bruise kit when asked about the makeup. How did you feel in that moment? Because when I heard that, oh my God, my heart skipped a beat for her. I was like, oh my God, why did you? Whoa, everything everyone has said is true. And then I thought, wait a second, the jury's not watching social media like us, right? They're not watching it. It's not a bench trial. It's the jury. They're not watching what we're seeing. So what did that moment do for you? What was the impact of that moment for you watching at home as an attorney who knows how trial works?
So when I heard that, I thought, okay, well, maybe she's saying her version of a bruise kit is makeup that would conceal a bruise, not create one. And that's the thing is that attorneys, we can spin this. We could take any fact and we could spin it. And so, I think her attorney, I don't know if they even picked up on that or not, to try to spin that back and recover. It was very quick. Now, people in the industry would know what a bruise kit is, but people on the jury here probably don't have that background, I'm guessing, so they may not have caught it. And yeah, this is the thing about trials, is that the jury hears what the judge allows them to hear. It's what's admitted into evidence. And it is obviously a selection of the universe of facts and documents that exist. And there's good reason for that, but it is frustrating for the public to know certain facts or believe we know certain facts and have the jury come out with a decision that we disagree with and then say, wow, if they would have just known this, it would have been different. And I also got to think it's difficult if you're a juror and you went through that whole trial and you listened to the judge, and you listened to the evidence and you made your decision. And then later on, when you did your research, which you can do, and learned, oh, wow, I didn't know about all this stuff. Had I known about the Jerry Judge tape,
Oh man.
I would have completely came to a different decision. And I think that's got to be frustrating. I think the answer, hopefully for them, would be is that the judge had a reason for not allowing it in, and we just have to trust the system. But that's the thing is about justice, is that it's not about the truth. It's not about right or wrong. Unfortunately, it's about what the judge or jury believes. And on the information that's presented. And that's why trials are theater. It's not it's supposed to be the search for the truth, but it's really about us orchestrating what witnesses we're going to bring in, the order of proof that we're going to present this story, and how we're going to do it, what we're going to keep in, what we're going to keep out. And so, we're hearing something that's incomplete, and but it's the system we got.
Right. It's about I tell people all the time, anti-DV, law and facts. And when people bring up things that, these investigators online, like you said, they're crowdsourcing information, right? But if the jury doesn't know, what do we care, right? I wish that people did what they're doing with this case in wrongful conviction cases, right? If we could get the Innocence Project to get all these people to do some work for them online, we'd help a lot of people. But, you're right. We're just working with the system that we have, and people are seeing that it's kind of broken. And this is a defamation case. We're not seeing all of the fun stuff, God forgive me, it's not fun. In criminal cases, it's not fun, but it's more entertaining, right, to watch those cases. That's why we have Law and Order, not civil trials, right? They have all the criminal stuff going on. I think people at home, we're sitting here with our snacks. I've said this before, with our snacks. We can use the restroom when we want. We can make whatever facial expression we want. But this jury is sitting there for 6 weeks, all eyes on them. Could you imagine? I can't. I feel for everyone in that courtroom. And we have someone on Discord. Listen to this username, Armadillo from the Hotel. Do you know that reference?
No.
Okay. So
yeah, from Kate Moss. Yeah.
From Kate Moss. And I made that reference on Court TV today for my Discord so they could know, we're connected. We're becoming friends. So this user said, why do people jump to conclusions on what they think will be the verdict so quickly on long trials instead of hearing all the evidence and everything else first?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's a fool's errand to predict the outcome of a court case. And the only thing that, I found with any consistency is if I predict it's going to happen, it probably is not going to happen. When I'm in court and I'm like, I won this, there's no way that the judge could rule against my client on this. And then I, get the ruling and it's like, wow, how could another person have heard this evidence and come to a different conclusion? How is that even possible? Well, of course it's possible because we're not doing science. We're not in a lab. We're not doing math where it's like 2 + 2 is always 4. Doesn't matter where you're doing it, who's doing it, it's 4. But here it's like, do you believe Johnny or do you believe Amber? And it's ultimately what this case comes down to, because they can't both be right. One is lying. Who do you believe? Well, that depends probably a lot on your biases. And if you're inclined to believe Johnny, you just identify with him, then everything he says is going to be believed. The negative things that are brought out on cross, like it was today, are going to be discounted and explained. Well, maybe he didn't send that text message. Of course he didn't understand this. The drug stuff, sure, that doesn't matter. See, we minimize, we excuse because that's our favored party. And then for Amber, it's like everything out there negative about her, we seize on, of course, because that validates our belief. But if we're skewed towards Amber, we do the opposite. And so really all of this decision making that's happening in court is through the lens of bias. And that's why, as an advocate, I'm looking at bias. That's the first thing I'm doing when I'm planning a case is that how is a judge going to be biased against my client? I have a man who says that he was the victim of domestic violence by a woman. I have to immediately think about the bias effect that exists in people to think like, well, how could that maybe happen or not happen? And so I have to address that. I have to identify and address it, because if I can't get rid of the bias, if I can't identify it, I'm never going to convince anybody of anything.
Right. That is brilliant intel, because I have found, on my TikTok, and I think on your Twitter, you do the same. We want to focus more on the other side, right? Because if you are looking to see how can you win, there are certain elements you have to prove. How can you win? You have to look to the other side. And you're completely right. I get called out sometimes when I present Amber's side, right? But that's what I want to show everyone, because I already know you guys believe Johnny. I get it. And we all know that he's a victim of DV. That's not really what this is about. What is this person whose testimony won the UK trial for the son, who went in for a TRO? The judge believed her then, right? You and I know there's no finding of DV with a TRO, but this person went in, presented at least reasonable proof, got a TRO. The judge in the UK believed her too. The ACLU made her the ambassador on what? Women's rights, I think it was, right? So how could this person believe she wasn't a victim of DV, right? So I love presenting that evidence, but sometimes I get people telling me that I'm biased towards Amber, which is hilarious because I only know Amber Heard as the 20-something-year-old who married Johnny Depp and they had no prenup, right? So their relationship to me was always toxic because I cannot imagine someone like Johnny Depp not having a prenup, right? So it always looked toxic to me. But yes, we do it because that is the information you need to look at more critically than the information you have on your side to figure out what is going to happen. So I think a lot of people don't want to admit their biases, but I think you're right on the money. It's about validation, confirmation bias, all of those things. So what do you think about the ACLU's involvement in all of this and having Amber write this article and their testimony and Amber saying donation, pledge, donation? What do you make of that whole aspect of this case?
Well, I mean, they look horrible. They look absolutely horrible. It's an organization who says it stands for rights of other people, protecting civil liberties. Well, what is one of the greatest civil liberties that we have in a democracy? It's due process. The right to notice, meaning time to respond to charges, and opportunity, meaning the ability to bring in evidence, hire an attorney, and make arguments to the court before a decision is made. This ambassador, their ambassador, had violated Johnny's rights to due process by running into court, what I think is on false evidence, really no notice or opportunity, when the guy's in Spain, when he doesn't want anything to do with her, when he never threatened to cut her off. He was no risk to her, running into court and saying, I need a restraining order against him. And then everything else that's happened afterwards. Why pick her? What due diligence did they do to investigate this, to say, well, what was going on in that relationship? Maybe Johnny did all these things that she claims, but what did she do? Why didn't they talk to Johnny? Why didn't they check her story out? So obviously, like you mentioned, she is convincing and she's an accomplished liar. And maybe people like the fame that was associated with her, but something about her, she's effective of infecting people. And so she gets in there and she influences them. She's very good at that. So she fooled the ACLU and then backed it up with this promise or expectation of getting millions of dollars. So there, some broken people over there, just like in a lot of places. I'm actually happy that that they're being scrutinized because they absolutely deserve it. But then when you look at the Children's Hospital, the other charity that was supposed to get the $3.5 million that was pledged to them, sick children cheated out of the money that would have been used for their care. They are without blame. And I'm glad that the Children's Hospital director was brought in to testify that, yeah, we got like 250 grand, 100 really came from Johnny. And so she cheated, sick children.
An accomplished liar. An accomplished liar. That is such an interesting phrase. And I think that it rings true with her. On Discord, we have VV94 who said, does Amber posing for TMZ to photograph the bruise prove malice?
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't, there is a piece of that I'm going to hit. Okay, so what we're talking about here is May 27, 2016. She goes in for a restraining order. She goes into the Los Angeles Superior Court, and she chooses to exit from the most public entrance exit of that courthouse, where the media go when they want to photograph somebody. TMZ is tipped off. We heard that from the employee from TMZ testified today. So we know that TMZ's there. They know they've been tipped off, probably, I think, by Amber. And and Amber denies that. No, didn't tip anybody off. I didn't want the media there. I was surprised when I walked out the door and saw the media there. That's complete nonsense. And if you look at that courthouse, it's 111 North Hill Street in Los Angeles, and you can Google it. It's an entire city block. There are 4 entrances: north, south, east, and west, plus an underground entrance that's secure. If she would have contacted the sheriff's department, and her attorney is very experienced handling cases like this, knows how to get in and out of that courthouse without being detected. She instead chose the most public way, where TMZ was known to be there, because I think she called them, or her publicist most likely called them. And so she was definitely looking for the media attention. Now, to get to the bias thing, she's got this bruise, or apparent bruise, on her face. She's photographed with that. She knows that it's going to be distributed widely now that she's the victim, not only just of, this is a physical assault that allegedly happened to her to cause that bruise by Johnny Depp, that she wants that to go to the world. And then the same thing with the videotape of him that she illegally recorded and then leaked to TMZ a couple months later. So to me, how that gets to this whole bias thing. So, malice. So to prove defamation against a public figure, you have to show that a false statement was made against that public figure with actual malice, which is an intent to harm or reckless disregard for the truth. So how do we prove intent to harm? Well, we look at their conduct, and somebody who's going to fake a bruise, who's going to call the media, wants to get photographed in their, international news, to make sure that her husband is falsely accused, embarrassed of this, loses opportunities, gets a illegally recorded video and leaks that to the press. To me, that shows a state of mind to harm Johnny Depp in 2016. And the jury could infer from that 2 years later, when she does her op-ed, that she still has that hateful state of mind.
It's very interesting. 2016, which I think started this whole defamation fiasco, the inference you can infer from what happened in 2016, that there's actual malice still and now related to the statements made in the Washington Post 2018 article.
Yeah, the thing is that there's certain times in law when you have to prove what's called state of mind. And mostly this comes up in criminal cases. So you have a crime that's committed, and the prosecutor needs to prove not only that the act occurred, but there was also done with a certain state of mind. And that makes it willful, and could make it a crime or not a crime, or certain levels of crime that could be charged based on the state of mind. So how do you prove what's in somebody's mind? Well, certainly if somebody says, like, yeah, I was, super angry at this person when I did this, well, then you have an admission. Most time they're not going to say that. So you have to do it inferentially. You have to take other facts and circumstances and put that together and saying, well, that shows the state of mind. So Amber Heard is not, she hasn't said, I hate this guy. That would have been a good question, actually, for them to develop from her. But she hasn't made an admission that she, had this hateful state of mind in 2018 when she wrote the op-ed. So all we can do is look at these other facts and circumstances, and how has she treated him? Well, you listen to the tapes. I guess that's the best evidence. The way that she spoke to him during the relationship was hateful. And so is that really, episodic or symbolic of the situation that she was in at that moment in time, or would that state of mind carry over even after the relationship ended? And, we know as divorce attorneys is that people generally don't think better of their spouse when they're going through a divorce or have gone through a divorce than when they were married. They typically get even more angrier afterwards. So again, common sense, put some facts together, and we're just doing logic here. And that's what needs to happen in closing argument. They need to tie this sea of evidence together and take all this and put it together and make connections in a very logical way and saying, hey, jury, here are the facts. You could string all these together to come to your conclusion.
Yeah, you're spot on. State of mind. So Amber, she didn't say I hate him. In fact, I think she said, I'll always have love for him. Right? But Johnny Depp seems like he hates her. And there is and we don't blame him, but do you there's a counterclaim. There's a counterclaim in this action. And when I look at the statements that Amber made in the Washington Post article and I compare them to the statements made by Adam Waldman, the attorney who, what in the world was he doing making these statements online? Only God knows. I don't get it. I'm not with that. I'll get your opinion in a second. But, we have Johnny Depp, not a fan of Amber. Amber, still a fan of Johnny, it seems, or she wants to make us believe that, and probably because of that state of mind issue. So what do you think when you compare their when you compare their claims and the amount of damages? 50 million on Johnny's side, but 100 million on Amber's side, right? We know they're kind of arbitrary, but I would think 300 million for Johnny, 3 million for Amber. Those are the numbers that make sense to me. But let me get your opinion on those things.
Yeah, it's a great point, because Johnny, clearly does not like her. He won't look at her. There was the email that came out today that from 2016 after he was facing all this restraining order stuff he was very angry, and he's saying, I want to go after her. And so that is direct evidence of his state of mind and could be used certainly by the jury on her counterclaim, because she needs to, prove that he acted with actual malice and having his attorney make statements about her. So that could come back. But the thing is that, I again, maybe because I am biased towards Johnny, but he's being truthful. He's not pretending. Just think about it. It's like if he went through all of this horrific experience, having false allegations made against him publicly, it's hurt him, it's hurt his family, it's hurt his career. It's been years in litigation over this. And if they ask Johnny, how do you feel about Amber? Oh, well, I love her. She's such a wonderful person. Well, we would know like that's a lie. You're not being honest with us at all. So to me, it's like, oh, I despise this person. Now, okay, well, how did you feel about her in 2020 when your attorney was making statements? We'd probably say, yeah, I hated her then too. So sometimes, telling the truth, it's always the good idea, but telling the truth will set you free. So yes, telling the truth that I have malice against her in 2020 definitely admits the malice element that she needs to prove, but his honesty on that question could then make the jury believe him on the other parts of the claim that would be denied.
Right. And you said the truth will set you free. Johnny Depp has made a big point. He said it in the very beginning of his case in chief. He said it again today. He just wants the truth out. He feels better now that the truth is out. Do you think, as an attorney, right? I always tell my clients it's better. And remember, we practice family law. This is a civil defamation case. It's kind of turned into a family law case. But I always tell my clients it's better to take control of these things yourself. Keep it out of court. Let's see if we can figure it out, right? In this case, Johnny Depp has said, I don't care if I win or lose, but we're having a 6-week trial. All of these resources, this time, this energy, we didn't fight the TRO. Sometimes clients have their reasons for that. Again, they didn't have a prenup. So anyway, he could just settle that case. I would understand it too. He didn't really need the protection against her either because he's always traveling or whatever it is. Do you think that it's right to have taken this case to trial, but not sue for breach of contract, that NDA, contempt, right? I think those would have, in my opinion, been far more successful, but I don't think he would have had this broadcast to the whole world for 6 weeks in this way, right? And he's trying to make a big point out of this, and I think that it's gone his way. He's winning in the court of public opinion, but is that fair to the court system? We have clients who, we fight for months to get a 20-minute hearing in court. Right? Sometimes we get there, we get it bumped and continued. If you're there and you're last on the docket, or if the court is taking you last in their lineup, you might get bumped to the next day. But 6 weeks reserved for him, just for him to say, I don't care if I win or lose. I'm trying to really make a point. We understand that. We get it. But could he have done this with a interview with Oprah? Maybe same impact?
Yeah, at first, when this trial started, I was like, I don't know if this is a great idea, especially when the negative info was coming out, and the messages that he sent, it's just like, wow, was this a good choice? But I absolutely think it was, now that I've seen this much of the trial, because he's won already in the court of opinion.
Yes.
Whatever this jury comes out to, he's won. There's no way that the folks that are on Justice for Johnny Depp are going to think anything different of him based on the outcome of this trial. And he needed the court process to extract evidence and statements from Amber. So had he just done the Oprah interview, a one-sided piece, that Amber's PR team would have immediately came back and said, well, you didn't talk to us, and we have a lot to say, and he's lying, and look at the UK thing and whatever else they want to show. And it's different. Here, it's a court of law. We have people compelled to come in and testify, documents, experts, the whole 9 yards. And so he is using that to clear his name. Of course, it would be great if he has a finding that she lied about him. But in terms of court resource, and then just to hit the other point about why didn't he challenge it at the beginning? And I questioned that too. And I saw him in his earlier testimony express regret for not having challenged it in 2016 when she went in for the restraining order. And he said he was advised to settle. And of course he was. Every divorce lawyer that's honest would tell him, like, hey, get this thing settled. Don't fight. You're going to spend a lot of money. It's going to get worse, going to get more public. Buy your peace. And he made a deal with her in 2 months' time, which is like in family law, this is like a nanosecond.
My God.
To settle
Wow.
a case this complex with no prenup, with all these crazy allegations. He settled it in 2 months. They settled it in 2 months. They did the right thing. They followed what we would tell them to do. And he's paid a lot of money to buy his peace. And that's where it should have ended, but it didn't, because, I don't think she was done abusing him. And she felt that she wanted to do something with her name and leverage this to, into victimhood. So I don't blame him for settling. I don't blame him for fighting it now. In terms of court resources, yeah, I wonder that all the time. It's a huge investment for the state of Virginia to do this. But as we talked at the beginning of the show, benefits to the legal system in general, engagement about the legal system with the public is extremely important for everyone to know. This is our court system. These are our rules of evidence. This is how things work, because any one of us, unfortunately, could find ourselves there at any time. And the more that we know about our rights, it's helpful. And also the more we know about how our courts operate, and if things aren't going well, maybe to affect change. So I think it's a good investment by Virginia into allowing, now international attention on our justice system.
I love that. No, I completely agree with you. You're right. Something like an interview would have never done this. Never, ever. You're right. It just would have been the PR war that has been happening in the background, right? But social media has taken over that PR war, I think. Do you think that Johnny Depp will be hired in Hollywood again, no matter the outcome. I think, like you said, the outcome, I'm not sure would really matter in this case as far as getting an audience to watch his films. But I do wonder, he seems very litigious. And people stay away from people who are litigious when you're talking about big money, big studio, Hollywood money. You see everyone from everywhere on earth being subpoenaed in this case, and they're not liking it, right? They filed motions to quash. They've tried to file for protective orders, right? So do you think that Hollywood would be ready and willing to hire Johnny Depp again after this case, no matter the outcome?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's extraordinarily talented, and he's extraordinarily popular and the most talked about celebrity right now. And so on merit, he should be put into these films because he's a great actor. But Hollywood has no track record of, hiring decent people. They hire people based on who they think they can bank and make money off of. And that's, one of the reasons why we had Me Too is because they
Mm,
tolerated the most horrible people out there. I mean, they're just terrible, terrible humans because they made money and they enabled these people and covered for these people. None of that stuff's changed. Now, of course, Disney's Disney. So,
right.
they're got the whole family thing going on, but there's channels that they could distribution channels that they could use for him. I think that he may not want to work with them. He may feel slighted by them and that they didn't support him and he may go somewhere else. So I think he has no problem at all doing whatever he wants to do and with a clear name. I think at this point, it's Amber Heard that, and again, I am, I'm really upset at how I think she's a liar. I think she's lied. I think she's done everything that Johnny has said and that we all believe, but
Yes.
she's a person and, and with a personality disorder, according to Dr. Curry, and, deserves respect and empathy just like the rest of us do. That she is destroyed and she has destroyed herself. I don't know where she goes. I mean, she becomes an oddity, honestly,
Mm.
in society at this point and may have some value as an oddity. And again, she has herself to blame for it, but still we're talking another person here.
Right. You're so right. So let me ask you this question because a lot of people want to know, and it goes to us saying, or you saying that Amber is a liar. I think that everyone believes Johnny's testimony. I think he comes off very genuine. I'm dying to see him in another film. I watched the direct examination of Johnny Depp in his case in chief, and I was waiting there like, "Ah, I can't wait for his next movie. He's so captivating. He is so captivating. And I think you have it right about Hollywood too. But listen to this question, Chris. Morgan Berry too, and they're dying to know this answer. I've answered it in episode 1, but I want to have your input. Did Camille set it up well enough for Amber to perjure herself when she says, quote, "So it's your testimony under oath," end quote, like when she did while questioning the pictures of Amber and asking if they are the exact same picture, just edited. Now, Morgan Berry too seems to be referencing what we call impeachment, right? When you're impeaching a witness on the stand. I think that people are confused about the definition of impeachment, but right, you have them repeat what they said a few times. You reference something, a different moment in time when they said something differently. You show them that testimony, the evidence. That's impeachment. I think that's what they're referencing. But people want to know perjury. Has Amber Heard perjured herself? And what can we do about that if so?
Yeah, so perjury is lying under oath. She's under oath when she testifies, whether she's reminded of or not. I know a lot of attorneys like to, remind you're under oath, whatever, but they're under oath the whole time they're testifying. And, if they make a false statement that's knowingly false, yeah, that's perjury and it's a crime. Could they be prosecuted? Yes. Have we ever seen anybody prosecuted? Extraordinarily rare. And, so perjury, unfortunately, happens pretty much a lot of times when people take the witness stand in a case. There's a lot of times there's one person lying and one person telling mostly true things. And so I don't see a lot of appetite for perjury prosecutions. I see zero chance of a perjury prosecution coming out of this. The problem is first of all, proving the falsity of the statement. Just so even if she loses, doesn't mean that she lied. There's a difference
Right.
there. And so even if they can prove particular statements that she made under oath were false, again, we get to state of mind because perjury is a specific intent crime. You have to show that uh, Amber knew that the statement was false when she made it. And that, she's stating it for the purpose to deceive. So she has to have that state of mind rather than an innocent mistake. Oh, I thought that photo was taken on this date or not. So look, that none of that's happening. Maybe in Australia, and I have a detailed thread on that on Twitter about the Australian dog incident in 2015. They'll mess around in Australia. They've already filed charges against her. She pled guilty to passing a false document, and they're looking at her again for suborning perjury. And if you look at my thread, I lay the whole case out for him right there. And I'm hoping, and I'm more hopeful for the Australian government to go after her for perjury than anything in any court case, because we just don't see that.
Right. Okay, we have Tania Robles 5. Now, I'll say this before we get to this question. A lot of opinions on these attorneys, a lot of opinions on the attorneys on both sides. And I like to remind everyone, both sides are doing their jobs. Both sides, I believe, are doing a wonderful job. They have to take on certain personalities on direct and certain personalities on cross-examination. And we've seen it switch. But like you said, Chris, earlier, the validation bias, the confirmation bias, when people are speaking negatively about the attorneys on Amber's side, I know that's what's going on, right? Because Johnny's attorneys take the same attitudes on during cross-examination as they should. That is what they're supposed to do on cross-examination. We see it all the time. We're used to it, but people don't see that on his side. And it's laughable to me. And I want to make them see it, but what can you do? So Tania Robles 5 says, was the judge allowed to tell Elaine how to lay a foundation with her questions?
Yeah. So, so judges can do pretty much whatever they want to do. And they can't, go so extreme where they're showing favoritism into one side in front of the jury. That could be a problem, could kind of taint the jury, because the jury might think like, wow, this side must be right because the judge is showing such favoritism. But no, I mean, that I think there is this more of an act of humanity. And it's not easy. I think the more that you're in court, and the more training, importantly, that you understand how to ask these questions to lay a foundation. It's actually quite simple. It's mechanical, formulaic. And if you drill it, like we do in trial advocacy classes,
Right.
You just do it 20 times and then you practice every once in a while, you have it down. But unfortunately, a lot of attorneys don't go to trial a lot, so they don't have that background. They never got the training. And then also, look, I mean, 6 weeks, they're there in court, 8 hours a day. They have the stresses of the trial. They're trying to do the best for their clients. They're listening to all this evidence. Things are changing. Game plans going off the rails because some new document or fact came in. We got their clients, maybe yelling at them or being disappointed. We have all the other pressures going on in their regular life and trying to sleep and avoid, everything else that's going on out there. And then, of course, you're going to mess up some stuff. And so it does go back exactly like you said, the bias. If you imagine Camille Vasquez as Amber Heard's lawyer, and if she did the exact same job, but she was representing Amber Heard, would everyone like her as much? No.
Never. Great point. Chicken fried rice and beans. Sometimes I think people are changing their usernames on TikTok when they're leaving us questions. because they know I'll read them. But Chicken Fried Rice and Beans says, we understand the legal side thanks to TikTok, but the jury isn't trained to understand. Will that play in anyone's favor?
Yeah, I mean, it's understand what? The facts or the
I think they mean the law. So we know that juries get they get the law written out for them and they can ask questions about the elements. But I think
Yeah.
that what they're, we've said they can't do any outside research. They can't use a dictionary
Okay.
for certain things, right? So
Yep.
I think that's what they're saying. We understand the elements and the law, but it hasn't really been presented to them, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah. So great question, Chicken Fried Rice. So
and
that's
beans and beans.
yeah, and beans, yeah. Yeah, hungry. I have that with my Moscow Mule later.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I learned this from my dad, who was a prosecutor, and so and he taught me a lot of good stuff. But basically, when you get these jury instructions, so if you're on a jury at the end of the trial, the judge just starts reading off. I don't know how they do it in Virginia, but in California, just read like 100 pages of law. And it's stuff that you and I learned in law school, and we took like whole class on and like thought about, talked about. Is like, what are you saying? And then it's like, finally, oh, I get it. But it took a long time. So here you have people with no legal education. The judge is like reading laws to them that they have to apply to the case, and then say, go in and deliberate. Well, that doesn't work. So what my dad said is like he would do back in the old days, blow-ups of these instructions, and he would boil it down to very understandable language and saying, you heard this instruction, this is what it means. This is how it applies in this case. Just like we talked about state of mind.
Right.
That you have to, this fancy word, actual malice. This is what it means, a hateful state of mind, or acting without any regard to whether your statement is true or false. Here's some examples of what that is. And then talking about direct and circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence is things that the witness observed or that we can see, that we know for a fact because they're in the document. But then there's other things like inferences that we take from the circumstances, and that's why we call it circumstantial evidence. And like a classic example the trial lawyers will use is like if we wanted to prove that it rained last night. Well, if you were up last night and you saw it raining, like it ever does in LA, you would know, direct evidence, it rained. But if you were sleeping and you woke up the next day and the street was wet, and if you had a newspaper and it was in its plastic bag and your dog was out there wet and everything like that, you would know that it rained, even though you didn't observe it. And that's circumstantial evidence. That's an inference that's logically created based on the facts that you're given. So you have to, as a teacher of law, go and take those instructions and break them down, because otherwise you're sending the jury in with a mountain of facts and this incomprehensible jury instructions on the law. Of course, they're going to come out with a bad decision. So that's on the lawyers.
That's on the lawyers. That's exactly right. Aaron Mac 82. When there's an objection, whose time is docked? Is time also docked for sidebars? Thank you. I love your videos. Thank you, Aaron Mac 82. So Chris, the objections, whose time is docked? Sidebar, whose time is docked?
Yeah, so I don't, I was wondering about that too. I do not think that the court could possibly count, because they're, she's using some kind of like chess, I don't know, I'm no good with that. I would do it like once, and then I would like an hour later, I would forget to like hit the button. I'd be like, oh crap. So like somehow and I should get like a law clerk helping with it. Okay, fine. Easy enough to say, okay, you're beginning the direct examination of Johnny Depp. That's the Johnny Depp time. Hit the start button. Fine. But every time they say objection hearsay and it takes a half a second, there's no way you're on the clock, off the clock for objection hearsay. So I don't think that matters. I think, though, potentially what should, I could see a sidebar, because that's an event that's maybe taking a few minutes that you could, start and stop the clock. But honestly, I do not know how the judge is running that one.
Yeah, my guess was case in chief, your case in chief, rebuttal. Now we know there's a Sir rebuttal, or her, Amber's counterclaim rebuttal. There's so much going on. Yeah. Who knows how they're doing the time. The judge does tell us at the end of almost each day, I think, but that system. Maybe we'll find out one day. My last question for you, Chris, this is a good one. Cow, duck, girl, what each team should prioritize in closing?
So the prioritization is really getting back to what the case is about, because we've heard, like today we heard Kate Moss and the Stairs. We heard Ellen Barkin. I can't remember if that's her name. Ellen Barkin, I should know. But,
That
Ellen,
is her name, Chris.
is that her name? Ellen Barkin or whatever.
I think so.
The girlfriend from like the 90s, And it's
she was seen outside of the Harvey Weinstein trials too. She was seen like in the line, like waiting to go in and watch the Harvey Weinstein trials. I think so too.
So we've heard what I call noise. There's information that's, it's relevant because it got in there, but does it really add a whole lot of anything? And I think at this point, the jury might not even remember, like, what is this? What are we talking about? So one of the points in closing is you got to land the plane. We were up there at 30,000 feet. We've seen all this stuff. Now it's time to land the plane. You got to make the points, and they got to count. And the point is not Amber being a horrible person. That's not what we're trying to prove here if we're on Johnny's side. We're trying to prove that her statement in the op-ed was false and about him and with actual malice. So they've got to laser focus and only talk about the things that hit those three elements, and then damages, number 4. So that's what has to happen for both sides. And then, Amber's side, particularly on her defense, is to saying, hey, you may think my client, and I, sometimes done this with my own clients, like, you may think my client is an awful human being, and there's plenty of evidence to support that. So now, like, maybe the jury's coming with me now, because if I'm, they don't like Amber, they maybe don't like me because I'm Amber's lawyer. So I got to build some rapport, because remember, the lawyers have never got to talk to the jury really, except for maybe some jury and selection stuff. So now there's an opportunity to call support. I understand you may think my client's an awful human being, and I would understand why you think that way. But that's not what this case is about. This case is about whether that statement was false. And you've heard evidence that Johnny Depp has done abusive things towards Amber Heard. And this statement by her says she was in an abusive relationship. Therefore, it's true, and it can't be defamatory. I mean, what did that take? 1 minute? In that 1 minute, I just created rapport with the jury. I've told them what the case is not about, which we've heard 90% of the evidence of, and told him what it is about. And then I've completely destroyed his case in 1 minute. But they gotta do something like that. But if it's this rambling, disorganized thing, they're going to lose the jury, and they're going to be like, I've been here for 6 weeks. I want to get down to business, and you're not giving me the goods. So I'm going to switch off.
Totally. I'm totally with you. And I lied, Chris. I lied. I have 2 more questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
My first one, fans in the courtroom and Johnny's behavior. It's a compound question. But we're going to let it roll. And Johnny's kind of indirect interaction with the fans, and the things he's doing at counsel table, where he puts his head up, his head down. He's doing all these things, which we know our clients would never get away with ever. And he has the whole courtroom on his side, basically, outside of Amber's counsel table, right? Do you think that's going to have an impact on the jury, and is it fair?
Sure. So the jury, we don't get to see them because they're protected. But that jury box is right off the side to Johnny Depp's counsel table. They can absolutely see when he's joking around, when he's passing notes, when they're smirking with counsel. And you just don't know what a jury's going to think about that. They may understand like why he's laughing at that moment and may agree with him, or they may be like, wow, like we heard today, Amber Heard kind of smirking when we're hearing some evidence or testimony that normally you'd think like, wow, you wouldn't really laugh if you're hearing somebody say that about you. So the thing is about facial expressions is that we can misread them very easily. And it's very hard. And again, people were very hard on Amber, and I was myself initially, because she's sitting there stone-faced for like 3 weeks or a couple weeks. And I'm like, wow, she looks really kind of mean because she's just stone-faced. But she is following the rules. You're not supposed to make expressions. So if you follow the rules, you're stone-faced and you look unemotional or maybe even mean. If you don't follow the rules and you make facial expressions, then at least you're, kind of humanized yourself or relatable, but people may not like what they saw. So there's no way that you can win or lose this thing, really. I mean, you just got to be yourself. Now, in terms of how the jury reacts and uses that information, it's not technically an evidence, their facial expressions, but the jury may use that. Their observations of courtroom demeanor of the parties, whether they're on the stand testifying or not, can be used. We had one case, where there was a personal injury case, and the person said they had a knee injury, and the client was at counsel table and used his foot to push the chair over, and
Oh my God.
like that. Lost that trial, and in jury interviews, the one juror said that person could not have made that movement with that knee injury. So you have to be extremely careful. You don't know what a jury is going to do, but hey, this trial's gone on long enough, and I mean, I like that Johnny's kind of joking around and trying to lighten it up a little bit. But I think Amber has a harder time with that. It's just something about, she's a little bit of a harder personality where when she does smile, it looks menacing almost. And again, maybe that's evidence of my Amber bias.
And finally, Chris, your opinion on what should happen and what might happen. Any opinion that you want to share about how you think the jury is going to decide on both the counterclaim and the initial claim, and what you think actually should happen?
Well, this is so hard. Like I said, it's
hard.
foolish to try and predict what a jury's going to do. We know it has to be unanimous in Virginia, so it's 7 jurors that have to come to a unanimous decision. In California, in civil trial, it's 9 out of 12, or in a criminal, it's 12 out of 12. So getting 7 humans to agree on something, that's going to be a challenge. But let's say they do agree. Some of the things that have been rattling around in my head is they may say basically everybody get lost. They may, say like, you people deserve each other. You're sitting there, you married each other after dating, knowing both of you were in, whatever you say about each other before you married each other, you knew, and you own this, and you're sitting there taking drugs. And, because we don't know how people view about that stuff. Maybe, you're cooler with the drug use. Maybe you're not so cool with the drug use. Maybe you're not so cool with the language that was used by both parties. So you could see a jury saying, both of you get lost. So, again, it's very weird. And I've done enough trials now where it's just like, and I've seen it where they could also come back and say, yes, she lied, damages $1.
That's right.
So what I think is clear is she has not established her claim at all against Johnny. So I think that's a goner. I don't think that thing has any chance of surviving. Now, wait, I should have made the prediction, because now it's going to come opposite true. But it's like, there's no way that's happening. But I think she's completely failed in her $100 million claim, and the statements that, were made, about her. I don't think that that's happening. And it's really Johnny's claim. And, I think that her claim, if I were on the jury, based on the evidence that I heard right now, I would vote for him. And that would be my verdict, but I'm not on the jury. And so it's up to 7 people to debate this and come with a decision that they can all agree to, which is by definition a consensus, because it's not going to be what one person wants. It's going to be what 7 can agree on.
Man, it's going to be, I can't tell if it's going to be a quick decision if they start before the weekend, right? Because they don't want to be there after Memorial Weekend, I'm sure. Or if they're going to take their sweet time. Who really knows? Chris, where can everyone find you on Twitter? What's your handle?
Sure. It's CA_divorce
The
is
best
where you
Twitter
can find
feed.
me on Twitter. And so I'm having fun over there, probably going to take a break after this trial and, we'll figure out the next one to follow. But, having fun over there and hope that we can connect up and, share ideas, because that's what I'm trying to do. It's not just broadcasting information. I learn from other people on social media who know more about this case than I do, or just have great observations. And it's like, wow, I never saw it from that perspective. That's why I'm there.
I love it. Absolutely. It's a great community. And I'm so, so thankful and honored that you joined us on Love and Order. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, LaMor.
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed on this podcast are not legal advice that can be relied on. They are based solely on the limited information provided. These opinions do not create any attorney-client relationship. Those seeking legal advice should contact an attorney in the appropriate jurisdiction and practice area.